Hello there, everybody. This is Alan Blumkin. I'm here with my friend David Nemec on another session of David Nemec's Trivia and History. Welcome, David.
Welcome. Glad to be with you once again, Al. Always a pleasure.
Same here. Okay, you start.
Well, we were talking before, over the weekend about the integration of Negro League stats with Major League stats and making them equal and possibly changing some Major League records as a result of their addition. One, of course, would be in 1943 when Josh Gibson posted a higher batting average than what is currently recognized as the highest batting average in Major League history, Hugh Duffy's 440 in 1894. And then you also have issues like Satchel Paige, who currently is considered to be the oldest person to make his initial Major League appearance at age 42 and then some, perhaps. Paige actually started pitching in the Negro Leagues when he's 19 or 20, so there goes that. Records would have to be rewritten all over the place, and I am not all for integrating the national or the Negro League stats, and there are a couple of reasons why I feel that way, and I think as we go on discussing them, we'll get into it and we'll find probably we have more than just 2 or 3 reasons.
Okay, for my part, I think the integration of the statistics is impossible, or next to impossible, because the Negro Leagues played relatively short seasons, and they played a lot of exhibition games in between the Negro League games or out of league games, and a lot of the box scores don't exist. Excuse me. Yeah, I know people are finding new ones every day, but there was no accurate record keeping for years. Yeah.
Yeah, and a site called Seamheads, which has done an excellent job of assembling what there is available. I think even there, the people working on it, when it comes right down to it, have to acknowledge that there are errors, there are omissions, there is some padding of certain stats, and it's very difficult to look back on some of the Negro League seasons, which were short, as you're saying, 60 games, 80 games, sometimes even less than that. And the teams didn't always play an equal number of games. And there were competing leagues that were both considered major Negro leagues that weren't necessarily equal in quality either. So there are really a lot of issues that have to be dealt with. And I don't think anybody really thought this through before making this decision. And I think it's a very unfortunate one because, as you're saying, the shorter season, if you look at this, just that alone, Major League Baseball over the years has gone back and forth between recognizing the National Association as a major league, the 1871-75 seasons in the National Association. For a long time, it was thought of as a major league. Now it isn't. Doesn't really have a designation. It's not a minor league, certainly, but it's just a league that didn't have its act together enough to be considered a major league status because the scheduling was patchy. Teams were dropping out and folding. Other teams were being added in mid-season and so on. But that was true of the Negro Leagues too. Teams were always dropping out, and if you go through a whole season, you'll see a lot of patchwork. And
I think Yeah. Yeah.
I just wanted to add one thing. If the National Association is ever again recognized as a major league, and I think there's an excellent chance that it will be at some point, then you have to contend with Levi Meyerly's .494 batting average in 1871, which has never been even close to equalized in a recognized major league season, and it is vastly superior to Josh Gibson's 1943 batting average. Now, do we really want to acknowledge this? If we recognize the Negro Leagues, then I think you have to take another look at the National Association, and it creates a whole other, just a myriad of problems.
I'll take away the cap answer to that at 3,000 hit club.
Right.
And the thing is that somebody posted this, that it was in the paper or something, that Josh Gibson is, supposed to have hit one home runs than anybody ever, and they can only document 238 of them at this point.
Yeah, many of them came in exhibition games and barnstorming games. And
one thing was interesting that the Homestead Grays played in Washington in 1943. He hit more home runs than the entire Washington Senators team, who shared the Griffith Stadium.
No, that is amazing. That is remarkable. And
Griffith Stadium was a very unfavorable home run park until they brought in the left field fences when Roy Sievers got there. Yeah,
but of course there's probably no breakdown exists of how many hit at home, how many hit on the road, and anything.
Yeah, I know that. I don't know why they came out with the statement before, as you said, before thinking it through. I think it's going to be impossible to implement.
It is. It's going to force record. Every record book. Immediately you can almost throw it out because a whole new record book has to be assembled that's going to incorporate standings, incorporate player stats, and batter right through left, all that. You have to try to find that out. For many cases, the vital statistics about many Negro League players are spotty at best, and for some there are none at all. There are other arguments too. I mean, the National Association is a big one, but there's an even bigger one, in my opinion, and that is that the National Football League still refuses to recognize the statistics from the All-America Conference from 1940, which existed from 1946 to 1949, a four-year period. Yeah. And they finally absorbed the National All-America Conference in 1950, and it was supposedly an inferior league, but they National League quickly found out that the Cleveland Browns, who were the class of the All-America Conference, were every bit as good, if not better, than the National League teams. The Browns went to 6 straight National Football League championship games once they were absorbed. So it's and yet the National Football League refuses to consider them, their stats. The Hall of Fame. I don't know whether that's true with the NBA and the ABA. That's I think the NBA recognizes the ABA, but whether they recognize there was another league before the NBA. The ABL. I know that's supposed to be a year and a half. Yeah, I don't know if they recognize those stats or not, and that's a good question too, because all professional sports have gone through this. There were hockey leagues. The World Hockey Association.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're only 16. But, yeah. No, go ahead.
No, the football, they do recognize the AFL.
They do. They do because they fully absorb the
They fully
AFL,
absorbed the league, yeah. But in the AFC, the only ones that were absorbed were the 49ers and the Browns and the Colts for 1 year before they folded up.
Well, they also brought in the New York Yankees. They split their players among two teams, the Giants and I think and then the Yankees had their separate team.
The Yanks.
The New York Yanks had their separate team.
And they were there for 2 years before they wound up moving to Dallas and eventually becoming the second Baltimore Colts.
Yeah.
I'm pretty well versed on this stuff also. Yeah.
No, that's good because I think that's a very important consideration. And although it had seemingly nothing to do with the fact that black players were not available for NFL use prior to 1950. There is something to be said for it because the Browns brought in a host of black players. Most NFL teams had not integrated prior to 1950. The LA Rams did in 1946 with Kenny Washington and Woody Strode, who later became an actor. A number of good Hollywood films, particularly westerns. And Kenny Washington was a pretty good ball player too, but nothing of the caliber of Marion Motley and Bill Willis on the Browns, who were pivotal forces on that team and ended up making the National Football League Hall of Fame, of course.
Yeah, it's one of the problems with the Negro Leagues is the players who played in the major leagues and the Negro Leagues, like Robinson, Willie Mays, Henry Aaron, Ernie Banks, Larry Doby, Monty Irvin, and Don Newcomb, just to name a few.
Yeah, there were many others. There were a lot of Hispanic and Latino players who passed as white, and got to play in the major leagues, but also played in the Negro Leagues, and some of them played full seasons in the Negro Leagues before actually making major league appearances. And in the Negro Leagues, we're talking for the most part about the 20s and 30s when the Negro Leagues were still pretty patchy, but this continued up to the point when Jackie Robinson was playing in the Negro Leagues, and he really was pretty much disgusted with the way the Negro League scheduling was conducted, the caliber of play, the umpiring. He found it really, really abhorrent to have to, he knew he was a very talented player to have to be consigned to Negro League play, and of course welcomed the opportunity when it was given him to show what he could do at the major league level. And I think other Negro Leaguers like Newcomb and certainly Sam Jethro, who was pretty far along in his career before he became a major leaguer. There was
another one, I think, yeah.
Luke Easter was another one, and of course Satchel Paige.
Yeah,
there were a lot of them.
How Satchel bounced from team to team, because I have this excellent biography on him that came out a bunch of years ago already, but maybe about 17, 18 years ago. And the writer said that Satchel was the first true free agent. He went wherever the money was.
Yeah.
So he spent a year in the Dominican Republic. He spent time in the Mandak League in North Dakota. And other leagues, other teams that wouldn't qualify as Negro League teams.
I know, and that included the Cuban League teams.
Yeah.
The Cuban League was probably stronger at some points than any of the Negro Leagues. It had a number of really fine ball players, and they would play year round. A lot of them played in the Negro Leagues in the summer, which and then go down to Cuba and during the winter.
Puerto Rico or wherever, yeah.
Yeah, and they perform all year round, and that they made a decent living. Nothing like what major league players were making, but it was something that they could eke out an existence on, and they did exhibit their talent. They had places that they could show what kind of players they were, and in many instances they really were great players, no question about it. But whether the whole the Negro Leagues in their entirety were ever really of major league caliber is another issue, because each team, I think, there were very few teams that fielded a full lineup of solid ball players. There were always teams that were patching, an extra outfielder that didn't do much, or a second baseman that would hit in the 190s, or a couple of pitchers who weren't that good who would deal with the weaker teams. They really weren't. I don't think teams are all. Maybe one or two teams could have probably played in a major league season in the 20s and 30s. I don't think you'd ever find a full league that could field a group of 8 teams that were even as good as the teams in the Pacific Coast League or the American Association or International League.
So yeah, Miniman also played 2 years with the New York Cubans before the Indians signed him. And but when they put the number of them into the Hall of Fame in 2006, he wasn't considered because his Negro League career was too short. Campanella started playing in the Negro Leagues when he was 15 years old.
Yeah, there was
Philadelphia. I think it was the Baltimore Elite Giants, or Elite Giants, however and you have others that like that, but somebody like Sam Jethro, I always wondered why he fell off in 1952 so badly, and it turned out that he was 5 or 6 years younger than his birth, older than his birth, than his back of his baseball card said.
That was true, of course, for Luke Easter too, and George Sproul. I think shaved a couple of years off his age when he started playing in a professional baseball, and I don't know, and Page, of course, never acknowledged what his true age was. Really, I mean, I read that same biography you did, and it's still it's open to question how old he really was when he came up with Cleveland in '48. They eventually assigned him age 42, but Page tried to say he was older, and others tried to say he was younger.
I think the accepted birth date for Page is now July 7, 1906.
1906.
Yeah,
okay.
That's what they're all using now. Who knows if that's true or not? But they've been using that for quite a number of years.
Yeah, they may have. I don't know I don't remember from the biography if an actual birth certificate was ever found for him, but that was true for many white players too, for that matter. Many of them came into professional baseball at age 22 or 3 and automatically knocked off a couple of years because they they knew they'd be in the minors till they were 25 or 6. And at that point, they wouldn't look as good. So they wanted to be younger, and they knocked their age down to 20 or 21.
Well, there were a number of major league players who served in the World War II that cut a year or 2 or 3 off their birth year. Hank Sauer was one. Johnny Saint and Phil Rizzuto cut off a year apiece. And, I think you're right. They another one that, really cut off, Vic Power, when he passed away, they had him, his birthday in 1927, and all the who's and registers and all cards had him in 1931.
Yeah, right.
So it's it was really, really widespread. Bill Bruton was another one that cut off several years of his age.
Yeah, you could do that. You could do that then. Not only Negro Leaguers did it, but Major Leaguers did it too. And, it was just, but really, to integrate their stats equally with Major League stats is going to create havoc that I don't think anybody. I haven't seen anything yet from any. I don't know what baseball ref is going to do. I don't know how they're going to manage to have 3 leagues in every season from sometime in probably the early. Almost I have to go back to the early 1900s when there were actual Negro. Well, they're going back to 1920. Okay.
Yeah, that's when the Negro National League was formed.
Yeah, so that's an arbitrary date too, because there were leagues before then, and there were.
No, there's I think 7 leagues that they Negro leagues they've listed
as acceptable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Acceptable, yeah.
Yeah.
Southern Negro League, the American Negro League for a while. They would play each other. The American League and the National League would play each other in, their equivalent of the World Series. And Willie Mays played 3 years in the Negro Leagues before he signed with the Giants. So most major leaguers in that period, in the early 50s and late 40s, had played a couple of years at least, and some played too many. I mean, some played so many years in the Negro Leagues that they couldn't shave years off their age because their records were, firmly implanted. They'd been around so long. The third baseman, what was his name? The guy who really was a good ball player and never made a major league appearance. Ray Dandridge. I'm trying to think of his name. Ray Dandridge. Ray Dandridge. Yeah. He was at our first regional in 1984, and he said he would have just wanted 1 game. They wouldn't give it to him because the Giants had their quota of blacks. In fact, when they brought Willie Mays up from Minneapolis, they got rid of a Negro League player named Artie Wilson to make room. And they were getting vilified, and the Dodgers were getting vilified for having too many. And they were the National League was way ahead of the American League with this. Al, I was cut off there for several minutes. I don't know what happened. Okay, I was just saying that Willie Mays, when he was brought up by the Giants in 1951 from Minneapolis, they got rid of a player who played in the Negro Leagues and the Pacific Coast League for a number of years, named Artie Wilson.
Right.
Because they had their quota of 4, with Mays, Irvin, Henry Thompson, and the backup catcher Ray Nobley.
And even though it wasn't acknowledged, you're right. There was a quota system then. I mean, the Indians faced that problem. The Dodgers faced it, and the Giants faced it. I don't think anybody else faced it that early. But
no,
you really could not. There were a lot of guys who got buried as a result. Artie Wilson was definitely one of them, and Danbridge certainly another. But I think going back to the 1920 figure, I think that's really arbitrary because it's like the National Association in a way all over again, the 1871-75 National Association. There were major leagues, or what they tried to claim were major leagues, back in the early teens and even into the odd years in the 20th century. And there was a guy who played most of his prime years prior to 1920. He was a very, very good ball player, a switch hitter, outfielder named Spotswood Poles, who's not in the Hall of Fame and probably never will be because by the time 1920 season rolled around, he was over 30 years old, and his best days were behind him. And he also served in World War II, and there were several other players. Pete Hill, another one who had a lot of good years prior to 1920, and Torienti was third. There were a number. Oscar Charleston came up in the mid-teens.
John Henry Lloyd.
Right. Yeah, Pop Lloyd. Yeah, absolutely. Another good one. Yeah. Glad you reminded me of him because he may have been the best of all.
And there's a couple of pitches that the Hall of Fame doesn't have. Excuse me. I don't know if Smokey Joe Williams or Bullet Rogan are in. Maybe both of them are.
I think they are, but Williams only because his rep was so great because his prime years were a lot of his prime years too were prior to 1920. Rogan came up around 1919, I think, but there were Rube Foster and a lot of guys who pitched in the early 1900s who aren't going to get the recognition, even though the stats are now going to be integrated because the 1920 figure, which I think is arbitrary, is going to determine who gets what and when. And I think
the cutoff year is the last year that they're considering is 1948. Yeah,
because that's probably a reasonable figure because by that time, guys who really were going to be stars who were still young enough anyway were signing with major league teams. There were very few guys who came up after 1948 who ended up playing in the majors, but there were some and. So I don't know what the caliber of play was in 1948. I have no idea. I haven't even checked.
Willie Mays was 17 years old, and he helped the Birmingham Black Barons win their equivalent of the World Series that year. And Henry Aaron, I think it was 1952, played with the 51, played for the Indianapolis Clowns. And Ernie Banks played with the Kansas City Monarchs after 1948, among others. So, they're making it arbitrary. So if they try to put in Aaron, Banks, or Mays, a number of the years, especially in Mays' case, a number of, most of his career is going to be Negro League career is going to be killed.
Yeah. Yeah, if you did, but if you don't kill it, then what do you do with his?
Yeah, well, Campanella played he was 16 in 1937. He played at least 11, 12 years.
Yeah, that's boy. That would. I don't know. It's going to really be interesting. It'll be really interesting if they put if they put somebody like Minoso in the Hall of Fame, because he deserves it. He deserves it actually on his major league stats alone.
Yeah.
But if they add in his Cuban League and pre 1950 stuff, he could easily go over the top. And what they're going to do, I don't think they have even thought this through, how they're going to decide what stats to add and how much weight to give them. And
who knows? But Major League Baseball created a big problem with this. Huge
Did you
problem,
see it coming?
Will probably never go away.
Did you see it coming? Did you have any foreshadowing?
No, I had no. After they declared them major leagues, I had really no idea that they go this far.
I didn't either. I didn't see any discussion of it. I didn't see any rumors. Nothing. But I don't know. It's crazy, I think, and I don't know how popular it is with. It's certainly not popular with statisticians, and I don't know how it's. A lot of historians probably. There probably is a conflict. And there's certainly a lot of Negro League historians who feel that justice was finally done. And
can you hold on for a minute? I have to take care of something in a minute.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I just think a lot of people I have talked to, been in communication with on Facebook, agree the same thing. It's going to be impossible.
Yeah, while we were away, I just looked at Rube Foster's record in Seam Heads, and they credit him with, going back to 1901, even though he might have pitched before then. Because 1901, he was already almost 22. 1902, he was 22. That's his first year. And the records are so patchy from those years that Seamheads is only able to give him credit for never more than 16 games in a season in any league, and he played in all kinds of leagues, independent, Eastern, Western.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
Cuban.
Yeah, he played.
And
he played all over the place. Yeah.
And these guys aren't going to be given their due. They're never going to be given their due for So I think putting 1920, I think 1920 made it easier for the statistician.
Well,
because
1920 was the first Negro National League that was organized by Rube Foster.
Yeah. And they did schedule. They did have preseason schedules. They did draft preseason schedules, but they were flexible.
Yeah.
And as you say, exhibition games against not only rival Negro League, Negro League, another Negro League rival, but also exhibition games against sometimes even minor league teams, barnstorming, which there were all kinds of games, and which ones to count, which ones to throw out.
Interspersed during the regular season. The exhibition games.
Exactly.
So it's not like what they call preseason now, where all the exhibition games are played, before the regular season starts. It didn't work like that with them.
No, not in the Negro League, and it didn't work like that in the major leagues either in the early years. In the late 1870s, the National League only had 6 teams, so they had a 60-game schedule. They played each team 12 times, each opponent. And that made 60 games and left a lot of open dates. And during those open dates, they probably played between 50 and 100 exhibition games. And they also tacked on exhibition games at the end of the season. So it's even arbitrary in a sense, just taking only scheduled league games, because there are other games that were equally important to these teams. They played an exhibition game against very, very good independent teams or minor league teams that they wanted to win just as badly as they wanted to win their National League games. So it's in a way the Negro Leagues pattern themselves after the early major leagues. They have a schedule. The schedule would be patchwork at best, and the National League was the same way. They may go 2 or 3, 4 days between National League games. In the meantime, they'd have 2 or 3 exhibition games lined up in that interval.
That I didn't know.
Yeah,
it sounds logical.
Yeah, it continued into the 1880s. It wasn't until the mid-1880s that leagues started playing seasons of 100 games or more regularly. And by the 1890s, they had a couple of 154-game seasons in the National League during the 1890s, 92, 98, 99. And they went back to 140 games in 1900, a reduction because they were shaved from 12 to 8 teams. But it's early Major League Baseball faced the same problems that early Negro League Baseball did. It was, difficulty getting parks, difficulty getting teams lined up, teams to finish the seasons if they didn't want to make their last road trip. All kinds of stuff went on that dictated that.
One of the things that I also found out a while back was that the major league teams, would charge rental to the Negro League teams just to play there.
If they own their park.
Because Clark Griffith owned Griffith Stadium, and he was given the early opportunity to integrate because they're bringing all these white Cubans, and he was getting more from the Homestead Grays to rent the ballpark than he would have gotten, the other way. So.
Yeah.
And a lot of the number of major league teams did that, because back in those days, most of the ballparks were controlled by the owners of the team.
Yeah, I think Dreyfus. Did Dreyfus own Forbes Field? I think he did. He had it built anyway, and I think he had it built pretty much on his dime. The cities. I don't think. You know more about this than I do. The history of how the cities, what the relationship between the city and the teams were on parks, who footed the bill when a new park was built. I'm very fuzzy on that kind of stuff.
The one in Pittsburgh was the black owner of the Crawfords named what the heck is his name? Big Black Gus Greenlee. Excuse me. He built the stadium where the Crawfords played. They didn't play at Forbes Field, as far as I know.
They didn't play Forbes. Okay.
No. No, I guess I'm sure these stadiums didn't have very big capacity, but they had an all-star game, which is much more important to them than our all-star game is to us. And they would play those. They got the East players against the West players, and it was an honor to be selected for the game. And they had these games in Comiskey Park, where the White Sox used to play.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure Connie Mack was getting rent from the Philadelphia Stars when the A's still owned Shibe Park.
Shibe Park, yeah. I think I know the Cleveland Buckeyes played at League Park in Cleveland. I'm not sure whether the Indians own League Park or not, though. I know they didn't own Municipal Stadium because other teams were free to play there too. And I think there may have even been some Negro League games in Cleveland Municipal Stadium, which was huge. Whether Gibson ever played there, I don't know.
Baltimore had a minor league park before the Orioles came in. The Major League Orioles came in 1954, and I'm making the assumption that the Eli Giants, which the team that Campanella and Leon Day played for, were renting that minor league ballpark for their games.
Yeah.
So, I imagine in St. Louis, I think they played in the then Sportsman's Park. And the Detroit Stars played in Tiger Stadium. I mean, they would make money off these rentals. That was more important to them than to integrate for a lot of these teams.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never seen any. studies on which parts. I guess so. Probably Lowry did this in Green Cathedral.
Yeah, it's probably one of those Green Cathedral books. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably I could find it in there. I've got to look it up because I really haven't paid that much attention to which parts teams use and how the diameters and the way that what the parts were put together must have had a huge influence on.
And there was a park out on the Brooklyn-Queens border called Dexter Park, named after a harness horse. I found that out years after I heard of the park.
Oh,
and Negro League teams and independent teams, those kind of teams used to play there. It wasn't Yankee Stadium or the Polo Grounds, but and that, of course, was raised after the Negro Leagues folded up. But it's, I think it would be an interesting study. The problem with Lowry is there's new parks every year.
Yeah.
That they can't, it's very hard to keep up with that.
Yeah, and most publishers, don't want to bring out a new book on. Yeah, so it's unfortunate, but yeah, I don't know what publishers are going to do with. Books that are going to be written about the integration of stats from the Negro Leagues to the Major Leagues. It really is a topic that, deserves a lot of attention and exploration. But, it's mostly the older guys, I think, who have worked on seam heads. Some, long-time Negro League aficionados who have been putting a lot of effort and time into getting these box scores assembled. I'm actually amazed at the extent of the coverage on seam heads. I wasn't even aware of it until a few years ago, of its existence, and I was only aware of the stats that appeared in the last issues of the Macmillan, and I knew those stats were not. They couldn't possibly be correct because all the good hitters were hitting 380 and not 390, and all the good pitchers had 1.10 ERAs. So what did that leave? I mean, it left a lot of players who must have just been terrible hitters and terrible pitchers filling out these teams, which may have been the case. But Seameads does make an effort. They made a real effort there to do as well as they can. I think without the Seameads material, I don't think Major League Baseball would have been able to come up with, I don't think they ever would have made a decision to try and integrate Major League stats and Negro League stats. It just wasn't enough to work with.
Yeah, because I found about Seamheads. I'm in a Facebook group called the Historical Negro League site, and I've learned a lot from that. That's how and there's one guy posted Seamhead stuff every day, and that's how I've learned a lot about the Negro Leagues and the Negro League players from that.
I
also have that book that Jim Riley put out. It was supposed to be a biography of every player who played in the Negro Leagues.
A biography of every player who ever played in the Negro Leagues?
A number of pages for the big stars and maybe 2 or 3 lines for somebody who hardly played there.
Wow, who put that out?
It's an alphabetical order, yeah.
Who published it?
I don't know who published it, but Jim Riley is the author.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look that up. Wow, I'm unaware of that. That would be that'd be an important book to have. Because some of these guys, I'm amazed how much biographical material they've been able to find out for some of these guys who played only a season or two, and
maybe they played, one gamers or 2 gamers.
Yeah, I think some of them probably don't even have a first name.
Yeah, but even the black-oriented newspapers don't have all the boxes or all the write-ups of league games.
No, they don't. No, they don't. I don't think you'd ever be able to find play-by-play reports of very many games.
No, I mean, I'm sure that the retro sheet is, totally hamstrung by this.
Yeah.
Looking for box scores from them. Yeah.
Yeah, I really wonder who the vital figures were from whom this decision emanated. I can't really imagine Manfred was the moving force, but who was? It'd be really interesting to know, because it's a decision really that for me anyway, came out of nowhere, and caught me totally by surprise. And
one of my friends is insistent that Manfred is the worst commissioner in the Major League Baseball history. I said even worse than Kuhn and Eckert. He said, yeah.
Manfred's got a lot of competition.
I'm sure it's a league matter, Frick. The only commissioner that tried to be somewhat impartial, the only ones were Happy Chandler and Fay Vincent. They both got canned.
Yeah, I know. And Chandler was a very underrated commissioner. He stepped in out of nowhere and did a good job. And Vincent got, as you say, got fired. And Giamatti died. Very early on in his tenure as a commissioner. But other than that, in our lifetime, you're going back to Judge Landis, and there's all kinds of, bad stuff heard about him.
They gave him judge and jury power.
Yeah.
After they hired him, because they were scared the hell out by the Black Sox scandal.
Yeah, they were.
And then he passes policies after, what they call ex parte, after, they occurred before he became commissioner. I'm not talking about the guys who took money like Seacott and several others, but Weaver never. How could Weaver? Because he didn't take any money and didn't report it. That was back in those days. But Landis came out with a blanket statement saying that anybody who took money or whatever to throw a game or was in a meeting and didn't report it was banned.
Well, that same thing happened in NFL in 1946 when Merle Hapes and Frankie Filchak were accused of taking money before the Bears Giants title game.
Yeah.
Filchak didn't. Hapes fudged, and Hapes was thrown out immediately. And Filchak, they went back and forth with him. He was suspended for a couple. I think he did get back into the National Football League, but his career was pretty much ruined after that.
Basketball had the same thing because the NBA in its early days wouldn't allow or suspended forever some of the players who took fixed games in the first major college basketball scandal.
Yeah, a lot of good careers went down the tubes right away.
And they wouldn't let them back in. And then in 1954, the Pistons had this player named Jack Molinas who was pretty good.
Yeah,
but he was a dumper.
Yeah,
and he suspended him forever, and then apparently he palled around with gangsters because a bunch of years later he was found with a bullet in his head.
Yeah.
But that's basically it. And everybody's saying now that because the NBA is the Major League Baseball or all the leagues are in bed with the various sports books, FanDuel and DraftKings.
The players are making too much money now. It's really hard to. But now you got me thinking about this. The Black Sox era. You're wondering what went on in the Negro Leagues, whether all of these games were above suspicion too. Gambling kind of permeated baseball. I would think it's filtered down to the Negro Leagues, and
it was permeated
filtered into the minor leagues.
It was permeated in the 1860s.
Yeah,
it's always been an issue. They have the four players from Louisville in 1877 got kicked out.
Yeah, there were players who were banned in the 1860s too. I think there were 4 players on one of the Brooklyn in New York. One of the New York teams in the 60s, and I think they all got back eventually. Their suspensions were lifted, but Landis was another piece of work altogether because he kicked out guys right and left He kicked out a pitcher named Ray Fisher because Fisher wanted to sit out his 1921 season. He wasn't given what he thought he was worth, and he just decided to sit out, and he coached the University of Michigan instead. And Landis banned him. He had no chance to come back into Major League Baseball. I think he's still on the books as banned today. Did nothing. Suspicious during his actual play, but just a decision to sit out a year and not.
Well, Hal Bach wrote a book a few years ago, titled "Banned," and he goes into all of this pretty thoroughly. I haven't heard of. The only baseball player they banned totally was Pete Rose.
Yeah.
And all the juices are still on the Hall of Fame ballot. But and so with the baseball aligning themselves with these sports books.
Yeah. Lost you again. Al, are you still there? Al? Oh, I got cut off again. Okay.